Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Azerbaijan has retaken Aghdam, a district, as part of a deal signed with Russia and Armenia to end the Nagorno-Karabakh war. The Azeri Defense Ministry says units of its army have entered the region. Ethiopia claims its forces are closing in on Mekelle, the capital city of restive Tigray region. Government spokesperson Radwan Hussein said federal troops have won a string of victories in the fight. The chief of Tigray Liberation Forces, Sebastian Ajaba Michael, confirmed that federal troops bombed Mekelle. US President-elect Joe Biden has officially been declared winner in the state of Georgia after a manual audit. The Secretary of State's office said a hand tally was necessary to meet the confidence threshold required by law. Meanwhile, Biden has rejected President Donald Trump's latest claim of winning Michigan after challenging the results. He said the recount in Georgia endorsed his victory, and the same will happen in Michigan. India has crossed 9 million coronavirus cases, second only to the US in the number of infections. The virus has claimed more than 132,000 lives across the country. Mexico has become the fourth nation to hit the 100,000 deaths mark with more than 1 million infections. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 36 deaths overnight, pushing the toll to 7,561. The coronavirus has claimed 1.35 million lives across the world and infected more than 56 million. Spain's Rafael Nadal has reached the last four of the ATP finals by beating 2019 champion Stefanos Tsitsipas. The Spanish world number 2 overcame Greek Tsitsipas 6-4, 4-6, 6-2 at the O2 Arena in London. The 20-time Grand Slam champion will play Russia's Daniil Medvedev in the semi-finals on Saturday. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Azerbaijan has retaken Aghdam district as part of a deal signed with Russia and Armenia to end the Nagorno-Karabakh war. The Azeri Defense Ministry says units of its army have entered the region. Aghdam is the first of the three districts to be handed back by Armenia. As part of the deal, Yerevan agreed to return some 15 to 20% of the territory captured by Baku in recent fighting. This includes the historic town of Shusha. The 6-week conflict killed more than 1,000 people, including civilians, on both the sides. Ethiopia claims its forces are closing in on Mekelle, the capital city of restive Tigray region. Government spokesperson Radwan Hussein said federal troops have won a string of victories in the fight. The government says the Tigray Liberation Forces have turned a renegade and are holding on to power illegally. The chief of TPLF, Sebastian Ajaba Michael, confirmed that federal troops bombed Mekelle. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's communications office said Tigray forces also fired rockets on the city of Bahir Dar in the Amhara region, but said the rockets caused no damage to the city. The 2-week-old conflict in Tigray has killed hundreds of people and forced over 30,000 to flee into neighboring Sudan. In Uganda, at least 28 people have been killed in protests sparked by the arrest of opposition presidential hopeful and musician Bobi Wine. In a statement, police said 65 people have been injured over 2 days, while 350 others are arrested. They said Wine was arrested while he was campaigning in the country's east for violating anti-COVID-19 measures. Following his arrest, violent protests immediately broke out in the capital Kampala and several other major towns. Youths have been burning tires and blockading streets to demand a Wine's release. Soldiers have fanned out across the city in armored vehicles. Troops and police fired tear gas, live bullets and water cannon to disperse the protesters. In recent years, Wine has inspired many Ugandans with his calls for President Yoweri Museveni to retire after 36 years in power. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has officially been declared winner in the state of Georgia after a manual audit. The Secretary of State's office said a hand tally was necessary to meet the confidence threshold required by law. The audit reaffirmed Biden's victory by 12,284 votes after 6 days of counting. Trump has been trying to overturn the election results in multiple states by reaching out directly to Republican legislators. Meanwhile, Biden has rejected Trump's latest claim of winning Michigan after challenging the results. He said the recount in Georgia endorsed his victory and the same will happen in Michigan.
No, I'm not concerned. The vast majority of the American people, they've already, all the polling data has indicated, although the Republicans who worry about it is higher, but over 78% of the American people believe it's, without question, it's legitimate. I just think it's... And I think most of the Republicans I've spoken to, including some of the governors, think this is debilitating. It's not it sends a horrible message about who we are as a country.
The U.S. says Iraq wants to maintain its partnership with the coalition forces to fight ISIS. Central Command Commander General Kenneth McKenzie says U.S. presence has successfully limited Iranian and ISIS activities. In a virtual conference, McKenzie said the progress of the Iraqi forces has allowed the U.S. to reduce its numbers. But he said coalition forces have to be there to help prevent ISIS from reconstituting as a cohesive group. He said ISIS has some 10,000 supporters in the Iraq-Syria region who remain a real threat. The general also said measured retaliations also limited what he called Iran's proxy attacks in Iraq. Earlier, the Pentagon announced it will cut down troops to 2,500 on President Donald Trump's order. China has strongly criticized an upcoming visit by the head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to Taiwan. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson says Beijing opposes all the official interaction between Washington and Taipei. Zhao Lijian said China will give a legitimate and necessary response to the developing situation. In a press briefing, he urged Washington to fully recognize the sensitivity of the Taiwan issue. Earlier, Taiwan's Premier Su Sang-chiang announced Andrew Wheeler's visit to island on invitation from Taipei. Su said Wheeler is said to have bilateral talks on international cooperation on environmental protection issues with Taipei. He added the trip will further benefit the relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan. China has rebuked the Five Eyes Security Alliance over accusations of silencing critics in Hong Kong. The Foreign Ministry warned the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand and Canada to stay out of China's internal affairs. Spokesperson Zhao Lijian said they should be careful lest their eyes be plucked out. He said China does not create trouble but isn't afraid of anything, no matter it has 5 eyes or 10. The alliance criticized Beijing after 4 Hong Kong lawmakers were disqualified over separatist statements. The second phase of Quad Malabar drills by Indian and the US Navies has concluded today. Both the navies participated in advanced air operations in the Arabian Sea. Indian Defense Ministry said its Navy's aircraft carrier participated in the drills along with MiG-29K aircraft. It said US Navy's F-18 and AEW aircraft E-2C Hawkeye also participated in the exercise. It added the navies conducted coordinated fighting on surface target during the Phase 2. India, the United States, Japan and Australia began their largest joint naval exercises in over a decade earlier this month. Chinese ambassador to Pakistan, Nong called on Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee General Nadeem Raza in Rawalpindi. The Pakistan military's media cell says the two discussed ways to bolster bilateral cooperation on security and defense. The statement added that they also deliberated on the geostrategic environment. Both the sides reaffirmed the commitment that Pakistan and China will continue to forge deeper strategic relations. The UN General Assembly has adopted Pakistan's resolution on the universal realization of the right of peoples to self-determination. 71 countries joined Pakistan in sponsoring this important resolution. In a tweet, Pakistan's envoy to the UN, Munir Akram, says the resolution serves as a beacon of hope to millions of peoples striving to realize their basic right to self-determination. He said it reaffirms the universal character of the right to self-determination. Akram said destinies of people will be decided in accordance with the principles of justice and not by force. In Pakistan, 36 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 7,561. The Health Ministry says 2,738 tested positive for the disease overnight. The ministry said there are more than 33,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 368,000 countrywide cases, more than 327,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said more than 159,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported over 112,000 cases. In the capital Islamabad, over 25,000 have been infected so far. India has crossed 9 million coronavirus cases, second only to the US in the number of infections. The virus has claimed more than 132,000 lives across the country, while Mexico has become the fourth nation to hit the 100,000 deaths mark with more than 1 million infections. The coronavirus has claimed 1.35 million lives across the world and infected more than 56 million people. More in this report.
While the world desperately works to put together a COVID-19 vaccine, the virus continues to end thousands of lives and livelihoods every day. In the US, hospitality industry, educational departments, and many other socio-economic dynamics are on the verge of collapse. California's government is set to impose a statewide nighttime curfew as hospitals run out of space.
There is something much more profound about a young death. These things are incredibly emotionally and psychologically traumatizing, you know. It's not time to process that, so we kind of store it away and we keep it moving. But it is like a war. It's like going to war.
Meanwhile, in Europe, a life is lost every 17 seconds as the killer second wave rips through the region. Norway's King Harald and Queen Sonja have gone into quarantine after a member of their staff tested positive for the coronavirus. The EU said European states must only lift restrictions slowly and gradually to avoid another wave of infections. But France's health minister said while lockdowns limit spread of the disease, their effects on mental health are overwhelming.
France, like many countries in Europe, is still facing high pressure from the pandemic. You can see that on this map. That is a whole. Europe is affected by the second wave, despite multiple preventive measures that have been put in place for months by most countries.
Hungary has become the first European Union state to import Russia's Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine, while the World Health Organization has advised doctors against prescribing Gilead's remdesivir to coronavirus patients. This has cast doubts on the effectiveness of the only antiviral approved by the US Food and Drug Administration.
World leaders have urged the G20 to help close a funding gap to buy vaccines and tests for combating the COVID-19 pandemic. Along with the international organizations, the leaders have sent a letter to Riyadh ahead of the virtual G20 summit this weekend. The signatories of the letter include leaders of South Africa, Norway, the WHO, and the President of the European Commission. The letter says G20 investment for the $4.5 billion COVID-19 funding gap will immediately save lives. It also called on the bloc to spend on securing supplies for low-income countries. A facility set up by the WHO and the Gavi Vaccine Group has raised more than $2 billion, which it says are insufficient. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The United States says it will soon announce a regional investment fund for Central Asia. U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said he will also hold a meeting with Uzbek, Pakistani and Afghan representatives. Khalilzad said the U.S. will discuss connectivity, trade and development initiatives with the representatives of these countries. In a series of tweets, he mentioned his meeting with Uzbekistan's Foreign Minister Abdul Aziz Kamilov in Washington. He said the two sides discussed the current status of intra-Afghan talks and the importance of an immediate reduction in violence. Khalilzad added they also deliberated on the region's role in aiding the Afghan peace process. The envoy said both reaffirmed the importance of regional development facilitated by the peace in Afghanistan. The Arab League has condemned U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's visit to Israeli settlements in the West Bank and Golan Heights. Pompeo has become the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit Israeli-occupied lands. In a statement, League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghaid called Pompeo's tour a flagrant violation of international law. Ghaid said the visit encourages the construction of illegal Israeli settlements, which is the greatest obstacle to peace. Damascus has also slammed the visit as provocative and a violation of Syria's sovereignty. During his visit, Pompeo announced plans to allow products from Israeli settlements in the West Bank to be labeled as made in Israel. But Palestine says made in Israel tags will not legitimize the settlements, which will be gone sooner or later. Turkey's Interior Minister Suleyman Soylu claims the Kurdistan Workers' Party will be eliminated from the country in 1 year. Speaking in Ankara, Soylu said Turkey has achieved considerable success when it comes to eliminating terrorism. He said the number of terrorists inside the country is below 340. The minister said nearly 2,000 PKK terrorists had left the group on their own accord. Turkey blames PKK for some 40,000 deaths in a 30-year conflict. European Union foreign ministers have agreed to push ahead with a new round of curbs on Belarusian officials. The second round of sanctions also includes Belarusian companies. In a press briefing, EU's chief Joseph Borrell said the latest curbs are in response to state repression of pro-democracy protests. He said the sanctions are expected to target those who finance President Alexander Lukashenko and his government. Brussels has already blacklisted almost 50 Belarusian officials over the disputed presidential election in August and a crackdown on the opposition. The new wave of sanctions follow the death of a protester last week, allegedly at the hands of the security forces. In Sudan, refugees from Ethiopia's Tigray region are in urgent need of humanitarian aid, with local help falling severely short. More in this report.
As the conflict between Ethiopia's federal government troops and the semi-autonomous Tigray region rages on, thousands of civilians have been forced to abandon their lives and flee to neighboring countries. The UN's refugee agency estimates over 27,000 Ethiopians have fled to Sudan. Migrants are struggling to survive under challenging circumstances across the border.
We have water, but we need food and clothes. We brought nothing with us, leaving all our belongings at home. We also need a hospital, as many of us are sick. Some expectant mothers are in desperate need of help.
While the refugees complain about the lack of basic amenities, Sudan's government argues it has set up 8 temporary shelters where they can receive food, accommodation, and medical service.
We can see that things are still getting established in terms of the response, the humanitarian response. So it's something that we are monitoring. MSF has set up just today a nutrition screening point at the crossing point so that we can at least observe the people that are coming in and that might have malnutrition.
Sudan's Refugee Commission is calling for international support to avoid a large-scale humanitarian crisis.
Christmas trees have officially become essential shopping in France as the government granted an exception from lockdown rules. The announcement has brought a sigh of relief for those related to the industry. More in this report.
The ongoing pandemic means this Christmas is likely to be very different to those in previous years. But there was at least some good seasonal news this week as the French Ministry of Agriculture issued a decree stating Christmas tree sales will be allowed from Friday onwards. Preparations are underway as tree producers and sellers say they are confident sales will be good despite the COVID-19 lockdown. The government decision came after intense lobbying from the industry, which feared a total collapse of its annual sales.
We are relatively confident this year. All Christmas tree producers took steps along with the parliamentarians, senators and sub-prefects of each region to emphasize the fact that it was absolutely necessary to sell Christmas trees this year as essential products for us to be able to make a living from our work.
A florist in Paris says he hopes Christmas trees will sell well as it is an important holiday where people gather with their families and with the traditional tree. But to make sure he would not be stuck with leftover trees, the florist has come up with a smart strategy.
We don't know yet. We are in the dark because of the pandemic. We do not have a precedent as we've never seen this. So we don't know where we're going. What I am going to do is I'll keep a stock of trees, and when that stock reduces to a certain threshold, I will order more.
Each year, 6 million trees are sold in France, of which 80% are homegrown. However, the cut trees are not popular with environmentalists. Several of France's Green Party mayors have said their city will not have Christmas trees this year, but will instead feature festive displays of live plants and trees.
The International Monetary Fund says it has reached a staff-level agreement with Egypt after the first review of a $5.2 billion financing. In a statement, the IMF said a $1.6 billion tranche will be dispersed upon the approval of the Executive Board. It said the Egyptian economy performed better than expected despite the pandemic. Inflation fell to its lowest levels in a decade, remaining below IMF targets despite quickening in October. This year, Cairo negotiated 2 new loans worth nearly $8 billion to cushion the economy amid COVID-19. The International Monetary Fund says the world economy is recovering from the depths of the coronavirus crisis. In a report, the IMF said there are signs of slowing momentum in countries with resurging infection rates. IMF's Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, says progress in vaccine development is significant, but she cautioned the economic path ahead remains difficult and prone to setbacks despite some positive signs. Georgieva said the US and other advanced economies reported stronger than expected economic activity in the third quarter. She said fiscal spending of nearly $12 trillion and monetary policies had averted worse outcomes. European stocks have inched higher as investors monitor rising COVID-19 cases and conflicting prospects for a US stimulus. The pan-European stocks 600 has edged up with retail stocks leading. London's FTSE 100 has gained marginally, while Italy's FTSE MIB has added over 0.5%. Frankfurt's DAX has inched above the flat line cautiously. The CAC 40 in Paris has also risen nearly 0.5%. Earlier, Asian bourses traded mixed. Japanese and Australian bourses shed, while Hong Kong, mainland Chinese and South Korean stocks edged up. In tennis, Spain's Rafael Nadal has reached the last 4 of the ATP finals by beating 2019 champion Stefanos Tsitsipas. The Spanish world number 2 overcame Greek Tsitsipas 6-4, 4-6 and 6-2 at the O2 Arena in London. The 20-time Grand Slam champion will play Russia's Daniil Medvedev in the semi-finals on Saturday. In another contest, Russia's Andrei Rublev defeated Dominic Thiem of Austria 6-2, 7-5 in straight sets. The loss comes as a wake-up call for Thiem as he is already through to the last 4. In the Spanish La Liga, Real Madrid captain Sergio Ramos has suffered a hamstring injury on international duty with Spain. Ramos was substituted in the first half of the team's 6-0 thrashing of Germany. Ramos will miss Real's next 3 games, which include the crucial Champions League fixture against Inter Milan. Real have lost 7 of the last 8 Champions League matches in which Ramos did not play. The Catalonians are 4th in the La Liga table and 3rd in their Champions League group. Real face a grueling schedule with games against Alaves, Sevilla, Borussia and Atletico Madrid over the next 3 weeks. Newcastle United confirmed they are in a legal dispute with Premier League over a failed takeover bid in the summer. Earlier, a Saudi Arabia-backed consortium withdrew its $460 million offer for Newcastle. The Premier League said the bid failed after the consortium declined independent arbitration and voluntarily withdrew. But Newcastle accused the league of acting inappropriately in rejecting the takeover offer. The club revealed the legal case in response to alleged leaks by the Premier League. In a statement, the club said it understands that these will be matter of great concern to its fans. It added Newcastle have no choice but to respond and update its fans. 2-time winners England have been drawn against 6 nations rivals France in the Rugby World Cup 2021 pool stages. Defending champions and host New Zealand will face Wales and Australia in their group. Ireland and Scotland are yet to secure their places in the tournament and their qualifiers have been postponed. Former champions, the United States, are in Pool B alongside Canada and yet to be determined qualifiers from Europe and Asia. England are currently ranked number 1 in the world after beating France last weekend. The Rugby World Cup will take place from 18th of September to 16th of October next year, with the final being played at Eden Park. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.